Joe Rogan, love him or hate him, is one of the most popular podcast hosts in the world. And despite a slew of recent controversies, from spreading utter disinformation about COVID to getting caught repeatedly using the N-word, the controversy he courts either rolls off his back or he spins it to his own advantage.
In a lot of ways, like, all this is a relief, because it's like, just because that video had always been out there.
Right.
It's like, this is a political hit job. And
Yes.
so they're taking all this stuff that I've ever said that's wrong and smushing it all together.
Right.
But it's good because it makes me address some that I really wish wasn't out there.
Joining me now with more on the Teflon talker, Daniel Russo, researcher and teaching fellow in the communications department at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, my alma mater. Welcome, Daniel. So let's start with some numbers here. An estimated 11 million people tune in for each episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. They are overwhelmingly male, 71%. The average listener age is 24 years old, and the audience is evenly split between high school grads and those who have gone to college. What does all of this tell you about his appeal?
Well, I think Rogan's political mindset fits well with that somewhat narrow demographic makeup of mostly young white males. Like this category of people, Rogan is quite hard to politically define. He was a Bernie supporter and certainly cares about important policy proposals like a higher minimum wage or accessible public health care. He also is for the legalization of cannabis and is critical of the police and justice system. However, this makes him a little bit left-leaning, while at the same time obviously holding a variety of traditionally moderate, conservative, and extreme positions. So some people like to label this alt-right. I don't think that's quite fitting for Rogan, but there can be parallels made. No matter what, though, the ambivalence doesn't mean Rogan is non-ideological as much as some of his fans might want to believe or say. Rather, it just means he's being pulled in many directions.
One of your colleagues at UNC Greensboro put it like this. Let's listen.
Who can have on his podcast Ben Shapiro and Alex Jones and have deep and interesting, meaningful conversations with them. And then in the one other breath, he can have on Cornel West and Bernie Sanders and do the exact same thing. And this really resonates with people.
And also, he's able to do that because he keeps him in the chair for hours and hours, right? Right. So what do you think is unpredictability Joe Rogan's superpower?
Yeah, I would say his amicability, at least to whatever persuasive sounding information is being shared with him, coupled with his long-term ambivalence, can definitely explain some of his popularity. And what's partially problematic with this, with Rogan's discourse at large, is how often he switches between these frames of admitting ignorance on the one end, and then on the other end, he has those more controversial moments where he's passionately and confidently smearing the scientific community or public institutions or various social movements and identities. And now this is not at all to say that scientific communities, the government, media, institutions, even progressive social movements aren't deserving of critique. That seems essential to democracy, of course. But the merits of critique, diversity of thought, and admitting ignorance notwithstanding, it's Rogan and his guests and perhaps his fans' mode of critique, their posture of confidence and talk of just being rational, just telling it like it is, that not only has mass appeal to people who like the aesthetic of rationality and criticism and non-ideological or apolitical truth-telling, but it also leads to some pretty divisive, partisan, and often simply relative notions of truth.
One pop culture writer told CNN that his strength is in trusting his audience to draw their own conclusions. Why would that be so powerful at this moment?
Yeah, so as I kind of already alluded to, Rogan likes to make the argument that he is merely trying to collect and showcase a diverse range of opinions for the sake of good, rational discourse. But of course, it's crucial to understand that he's at least been disproportionately platforming perspectives that we might consider at their best thought-provoking, critical, even exciting, but at their worst, of course, entirely false and dangerous. And this requires a significant amount of media literacy from his audience, and the rhetorical style in which questionable conversations are being discussed tend to play at least some role in the perceptions of their legitimacy.
All right, Daniel Russo, thank you so much.